Hello, and welcome to another edition of Conversations from Stritch. My name is Christopher Sindt, and I'm the Provost here at Lewis. President Livingston is away today and will be back next week. Our focus today is on community-engaged learning and professional placements. I'm really happy to welcome some guests from our different colleges and from our Office of Community Engaged Learning to talk about that over the course of the hour we have today. But first, I just want to make a couple of announcements before we turn to that. First is that is about athletics. The Great Lakes Valley Conference, the GLVC, announced on Monday of this week that it will be postponing fall competition in the league to the spring semester for most of its sports. Specifically, that impacts men's and women's soccer as well as women's volleyball. For Lewis, our cross-country track will continue to compete as scheduled, and the sports that span the year and begin in the beginning of the fall will also continue to have a regular schedule. The presidents, the league, the NCAA, all are in constant conversation about how things are going and will continue to make decisions. But that is the significant announcement that was made next week, that we are working to continue to build community around our teams and to support our student athletes. I'd just really like to thank especially the coaches of those three teams for their incredible work in, as I said, maintaining community in their team community, in their team camaraderie, as well as our athletic director, John Planick, and President Livingston have been very engaged in the work in the league, and they've been doing incredible work to support our student athletes and our teams. The second announcement I want to make has to do with our Albuquerque campus. The state of New Mexico guidelines have indicated that we will need to offer our Albuquerque instruction fully online in the fall semester, and we made that announcement a couple of days ago to our New Mexico community. And so again, I'd like to offer my gratitude so much to Jim Saya, our executive director in Albuquerque, as well as all the faculty and staff and students on our New Mexico campus for their incredible flexibility and great work there. Both of those examples or those announcements really speak to our need to be flexible, to continue to take guidance from our state and health authorities, and to remember to focus on student learning and healthy communities as we move forward. Our Romeoville and Oak Brook campuses are continuing in our plan to combine in-person, face-to-face, blended and online instruction, and we continue to make substantial preparations for the fall semester. And one of those areas has to do with community engaged learning and the professional placements, and we have received lots of inquiries about that. I just want to say a couple words of context before introducing our guests. One is that our mission at Lewis, our distinctive identity at Lewis, is really focused on providing an excellent hands-on professional preparation for our students as they're learning in their majors or in their graduate degrees and so on, and we pride ourselves on that so much. It's very much been on the top of our minds since March and April, how to continue to provide that high-quality experiential learning that Lewis is known for with all of the obstacles presented by the pandemic. We've talked about that quite a lot in reference to our STEM labs, our aviation experiences, and our nursing labs that have been picking up over the summer. Today, our focus is on external experiential learning in the community. One more thing is I'd like to mention that as a university, like all universities, we have a responsibility to the public good. One aspect of that is producing graduates that make an impact in the community economically and professionally. And another aspect is simply that we are a part of a community. We have neighbors, we have a local community. And President Livingston and I have mentioned several times over the course of these conversations how much we're engaged we're both reaching out to help our community, but also getting help from our local community. And I hesitate to name any names or to give any specific examples because the community impact is so wide-ranging, but certainly our individuals, professionals in the nursing and health sciences have had a tremendous impact as individuals in their communities, as supporting frontline workers as well as being frontline workers. But that would be our police obviously are making a huge impact in being supportive of local communities. But those examples could go on and on and on, so I will stop. So today we're sort of focused on both what we are able to provide to individuals and also what is our relationship to the community and how we will maintain it over the course of the coming months. So with that said, I'd like to introduce 3 guests. I'm going to introduce them all now, and then we will hear from each one of them individually, and then, as is our tradition, we will talk together at the end. First, Laura Wilmarth-Tyna, our Director of Community Engaged Learning. Next will be Kip Kline, our Interim Dean of the College of Education and Social Sciences, and Professor Jane Trainor, who is the Director of Clinical Partnerships and Placements with the College of Nursing and Health Sciences. So Laura, Kip, and Jane, welcome to Conversations from Stritch.
Thank you.
You bet. So I will just start right away with Laura. Laura, please go ahead and tell us a little bit about the work. And I guess I should tell everyone that I've asked each of our guests to inform our community a little bit about the work that they do and the kind of nature of the work that we're talking about today, because we're assuming that many people watching this may not be deeply knowledgeable about how community engaged learning works at Lewis, or how particular placements in education or nursing or social work, etc., work on campus. So they will each speak a little bit about just sort of the fundamentals of the work. So Laura's going to go first.
Great,
and I believe,
thank you.
And Laura has some slides, I believe, that we'll put up. And why don't you just go ahead, Laura? They'll do it as you go.
Thank you. Yeah, so let me first start by sharing a little bit about community engaged learning. When we talk about community engaged learning, what we're really talking about are opportunities that are course-based, that engage students in the community for about 20 or more hours over the course of a semester, and they're engaged with a community organization of some sort. So that can really vary from organization to organization, what it is that a student is doing. We have about 65 different courses that are offered each year that fit into this community engaged learning, or CEL, framework. And about 920 students were involved last year, just to give you an idea of the scope. So we can jump ahead to the next slide. This gives you a little bit more of an idea what I mean when I say community engaged learning. So we have students involved directly and in project-based experiences. Direct engagement are experiences where students are actually going out into the community, and they might be tutoring youth, they might be engaging with seniors, they might be doing some other activity where they're getting a chance to talk directly, be directly with someone. Whereas the project-based experiences are often a little bit more team-oriented, usually a student group of maybe 3 or 4 interacting around a particular topic. So perhaps they're making a marketing plan for a nonprofit organization, or they're working on graphic design projects, things of that nature. So obviously you can see, especially in that direct engagement area, there are some ways that we really want to be mindful about how to move forward this semester. So go ahead and flip to the next slide.
Laura, could I interrupt you? Can you hear me?
Please.
Could you just give maybe a couple of examples of some of the community organizations that students might be doing direct placements?
Sure. Yeah, we work with a lot of different kinds of organizations in the region. So anything from the White Oak Library District, which serves Romeoville, Lockport, and Crest Hill, Boys and Girls Clubs in Joliet, working with a couple of organizations in the area that work directly with youth, like Heart Haven Outreach or H2O. So it's really varied, especially for that direct engagement. We work with a couple of senior serving organizations. And so the idea for those experiences is that students are directly interacting with other people.
Thanks.
So as a result of that, we're really mindful of how to ensure student safety. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're planning to do for the fall, just so folks have an understanding of what we're recommending to faculty members and what students can expect, and also the guidance that we're providing to our community partners. So if we can look at that slide, this gives you a little bit of an idea of our work. So if you look on the left side of the screen, you see a little bit about how Lewis is structured, so folks know that we're moving forward with this sort of hybrid model for the fall, with classes having some in-person components depending on the course, and that some things have been moved virtual. We're aligning this with the Restore Illinois plan, so of course we're in phase 4 currently. And then on the far right, you can see what our guidance is. And assuming that we're continuing to be in phase 4, we are encouraging folks to identify community engaged learning partners for the fall semester, and that there are, it is okay basically for faculty members to have in-person opportunities, but we are heavily encouraging folks to consider virtual opportunities. We want to make sure that we're keeping folks safe, so if there are in-person opportunities in those moments, the students will be, I think, reassured to know that any partners we're working with are being asked to observe safety guidelines in terms of making sure that they're being able to distance and things of that nature. And then we are asking faculty members to ensure that every class has at least one virtual option. And if they do have in-person options, that the conversation has already happened between the faculty member and the partner to have a plan if we would go backwards in the state of Illinois plan, or if we were supposed to make a decision because of whatever reason to move a little bit backward, that we are prepared for that so that there aren't going to be any surprises and that we can feel confident in our plans to move forward.
That's great. So if I can kind of summarize a little bit about what I was just hearing from you, the plan is to give faculty and partners the option to kind of work through a combination of virtual and or in-person instruction or in-person engagement in the community while we are in phase 4, and while also be preparing to go to phase 3 or to return to online. And if we do return to online instruction, we would move in those community engagements to a virtual engagement. And a student, I guess the point of that maybe is ultimately that a student shouldn't worry that if they begin the semester in a certain format, we won't be able to switch in that particular course or that particular engagement. They'll still get the community engaged experience virtually.
Right. So that was something that was a big priority to our office. But as you might imagine, a lot of our partners are beginning to reimagine their work just as we have been reimagining how things work at Lewis. And so we have been able to brainstorm with them about this new environment, this new context, and the kinds of ways students can be engaged that are still really meaningful and valuable to the organization. So again, we want to keep students safe, and we want to make sure the ways that they're engaging are meaningful and contribute to their learning and also contribute to the work of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. Laura, are you, so you represent, our primary liaison to so many different types of organizations. What are you hearing from them in your conversations about what their challenges are right now, or how their expectations of us are changing, or their needs are changing during this time?
For a lot of organizations, I'm finding that there's a pretty significant domino effect. So in the community, decisions are being made, for example, about school and how schools will accommodate students and ensure student learning. And when schools are offering modified schedules and things, that impacts places like the library or the YMCA after school program. Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing a lot from partners about trying to find ways to continue to support the community, whether that's childcare issues or concerns about making sure that kids have a safe space to go and finish their schoolwork, because some schools will have more remote options, but parents will still need to work. Mm-hmm. And so where do children go where they can get support with school, those sorts of things. So we've been able to think creatively with partner organizations who have expressed a lot of new kinds of priorities that were not necessarily part of their work previously.
It just occurs to me that it's such a important and I was going to use the word extreme. I guess that's the right word. Example of or version of what you always do in your work. Where we're listening to what's going on in our community and in the organizations that we partner with, and their needs evolve over time. They have to react. Listening to you summarize what they're going through, it sounds very similar to what Lewis is going through in a lot of ways, and so I guess that's really a comment. I don't know if you have more reflection on that, but it seems just sort of like maybe a accelerated version of what we're always doing in this work of community engagement.
Yeah, our office has been around for about 10 years now, actually, which is awesome. And the wonderful benefit of having been around 10 years is that, especially over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, we've spent a lot of energy focused on really developing those relationships. What's been encouraging to me throughout this experience, when so many have been in crisis, is that our partners have felt free to reach out and say, we are trying to figure this out. We're not entirely sure how to do what we need to do now, but we appreciate you as a thought partner and as a collaborator who can work with us to try to move through this, whether that's identifying ways that we can work together or simply connecting them to other community resources, maybe organizations we partner with. So that part has been really encouraging to me.
Terrific, and that's so much exactly how it's supposed to work. So I'm so energized by hearing you describe it that way. So thank you. Please stay around. We'll ask you to come back in a little while, but I think now we will turn to Kip Kline, our Interim Dean of Education and Social Sciences. So welcome again, Kip. And I thought you could just begin by giving a little bit of an explanation of the work that goes on in the college and its whole range of different types of professional placements.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. It's a real pleasure to be part of the conversation today. I just wanted to start by expressing my appreciation for all of the faculty and staff who really do such a meticulous job of placing our students in off-campus experiential learning. And, they're probably not listening to this right now. They're probably not watching because they're busy doing that work. But I did want to acknowledge publicly just the great work that's going on behind the scenes with regard to placing students in these externally facing experiences. In the College of Education and Social Sciences, we have several professional programs at the graduate and undergraduate level that culminate in some sort of an internship or a practicum. Student teaching would fall into that category. But then earlier in their career as a student, they might have what we call field and clinical placements that are connected to the courses that they take. And all of these are basically opportunities for students to practice the profession that they're studying under the supervision of practitioners in their fields, and in addition to their university supervisors. Now, under non-global pandemic times and circumstances, that's a really complex process of organizing and placing students into these off-campus experiential learning placement sites. And as you can imagine, the pandemic has really intensified the complexity as clinical mental health counseling and social work agencies obviously are now, we think of those professions traditionally as spaces of, human physical proximity, and of course those agencies now have challenges and restrictions along those lines because of the pandemic. And then we think about schools, which is another really big part of our off-campus experiential learning in the College of Education and Social Sciences. And as Laura actually alluded to previously, all school districts are just starting to roll out their plans for the fall, but pretty much all of them have some amount of decreased in-person instruction involved in those plans. So both schools and the various professional agencies with which we work, they just have a lot more restrictions, and then those restrictions are then sort of passed on to our programs in terms of the challenges that they face in finding and making these placements. And also, I would add that these schools and agencies, because they are scrambling to make plans that meet the challenges that they're facing right now, and I'm thinking of school districts and school administrators right now in particular, they don't have as much bandwidth, right, to have conversations with a placement officer at Lewis University or any other university, right, to find placements for our students. So that's the challenge. That's the set of challenges that we face. Now, the good news is that we have a plan, and first of all, I want to mention that Lewis faculty and staff in the College of Education and Social Sciences, and I know this is true with Jane in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, we really have excellent relationships with our partners in the community. And so we've been able to meet the challenges of placement in part because of those excellent relationships. For example, moving into phase 4 even this summer, our clinical mental health counseling interns have been able to resume in-person placements. Already for our student teachers for the fall, we have 92% of them placed in school districts to do their student teaching. The other good news that helps us with these challenges is that accrediting bodies and the State Board of Education in Illinois have all adjusted their requirements for licensure to be more congruent with the challenges of the pandemic and the limitations that have been placed on all of us during this time. So, for example, in both social work and education, students are able to count alternative experiences, virtual experiences toward their progress for licensure. And that just leads me to the final prong in our plan to meet these challenges, and that is that we do have, and these are all sort of program specific, but we do have plans in each program across the college where we have a menu of alternative and virtual experiences that will make sure that our students are not impeded in their progress toward both graduation and licensure. And we're really confident that no student in any of our professional programs will be slowed down because of the pandemic in terms of their progress. I did want to answer, Chris, one specific question as it relates to education, student teaching, and in particular, the EdTPA assessment that I know we received earlier today. So this is another part of the state altering its requirements, right? And the state of Illinois has actually codified some of these changes so that some of the requirements are relaxed or adjusted to meet the restrictions of the moment. And that includes, I think our education students know that the EdTPA requirement has been waived. There's a deadline for that waiver right now, which is August 22nd. But I think that we will probably see more news with regard to a possible extension of that date with regard to the waiver of the EdTPA. And the bottom line is we have, again, a menu of options that's going to allow us to make sure that all of our students continue to progress in a timely manner toward their graduation and licensure.
Great, thank you so much, Kip. That was so helpful. It's great to hear that we are successfully placing our students. The accrediting agencies and the state of Illinois are being flexible and allowing for alternative means of experiential learning. and that our kind of rich partnerships and the flexibility of our faculty is really helping with making it all work. I think I just have one question for you before turning to Jane, and then we'll come back maybe with some more general questions about professional placements. But it's actually about social. My question is really about social work and clinical mental health counseling. I think, and it maybe only applies to those, maybe to others. But what are we hearing about telehealth? You mentioned that those disciplines those fields are so much historically dependent on close physical proximity. This is probably a question for Jane as well later, but we're noticing a lot in the news and in practice that there's a lot of telehealth going on. So I'm just wondering if we're already feeling the changes in those fields as a result of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, as you said, we traditionally think of those professions as ones that involve physical proximity, but our clinical mental health counseling interns have had quite a significant amount of telehealth experience, and the faculty and counseling have done a really great job sort of pivoting to a little bit more of those experiences. Obviously, when we were, and this is true of the social work program as well, when we were, before we moved into phase 4, all of the clinical experiences in both social work and clinical mental health counseling were through telehealth
Right.
placements, and so those continue, right? So we still have students who may not yet feel comfortable, even though we have moved into phase 4, to resuming an in-person experience, and then of course we have other reasons. Some agencies are not quite there yet either, but yeah, there's quite a bit of telehealth going on in both clinical mental health counseling and social work.
Thank you. So thank you so much. I know I have more questions for you, Kip, and we'll come back, but I'd like to introduce Jane Trainor and hear a little bit about nursing and health sciences before we all can talk together. So welcome, Jane, and welcome again.
Thank you, Chris.
And tell us a little bit about the work.
Okay, sure. So in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, we have various disciplines that include nursing, exercise science, speech language pathology, occupational therapy, healthcare leadership. And under this umbrella, we all have different clinical requirements, different clinical placement opportunities. And so there's a lot of work that's been done. So I would like to second Kip's acknowledgement of the faculty and the staff that has worked extremely hard to obtain these placements, these opportunities for us. And Kip, I have to also say that I believe that our reputation at Lewis and our strong partnerships and all of those relationships that we've cultivated over the years has really helped us get to this point where we are right now. So we've learned a lot of lessons since March. I think we could all agree on that. No one had the crystal ball to see how this would evolve. And so what's happening now in CONHS is we are starting to hear back from our hospital partners. So the main healthcare systems, where a lot of our nursing students that are undergraduates, RN, BSN, nurse practitioners, maybe that acute care setting, and it could also be exercise science as well as maybe some OT and speech language pathology in acute care settings. But we're starting to hear back from our hospitals, and what we're hearing is, yes, we're welcoming you back. We weren't sure that that would happen, if we'd be able to bring in different students into a system that's kind of been closed off to us since March. And they, on their end, have their own protocols in place and their own guidelines that we have to adhere to when we show up at the door at the hospital with the students and instructor, or however that looks. So each health system seems to have a specific criteria that they're following, and we will be following. And then on our end, we also have guidelines that we are that we've created for our partners to show this is what we're mandating for our students. This is what we're expecting them to know on their end so that they're prepared to re-enter into the clinical setting. So in the acute care setting, basically the rule is that our students will not be put on any COVID units, and there will be very little to no exposure to COVID patients. So that's number one. And then also just the fact that, there's a little bit, the social distancing will be adhered to in every setting, whether it's community or inpatient. Will, of course, the wearing of the masks and the rigorous hand washing and all the education that goes along with that. So we have a lot of different places right now that have accepted us back in for the fall, some with stipulations and strong guidelines. And, we're moving along. So our plan is that we're hoping for the safest experience. That's another big piece of this, is that we want to make sure that whatever setting we go into with the students, whether it be like Laura, a community engaged partner that you've partnered us with, or a hospital setting, that we're ensuring the safety of our students by making sure that everyone is adhering to the guidelines. And so I'm trying to think of what else did you have any questions, Chris? I had a bunch of notes.
No, it's great. It's, so just a little bit of summary of what you're saying is hospitals are starting to open up. Many of our placements in the college are in those acute care settings, so it's so important that those relationships are open, and our long-term relationships with these hospitals has been a huge plus to us over the last few months in preparing for the fall. And then I was really interested in what you were saying about preparing students, because that's not really, Kip and Laura touched on that a little bit. I'm actually kind of curious what they have to say about this as well, but we are preparing. I guess I'll just ask you, and then maybe Kip or Laura might want to join in. How specifically are we preparing students for preparation? I know we always prepare them before they go into placements, but is there extra things that we're doing to ensure that they are ready and knowledgeable about what they're going to be doing?
Most definitely. So on our end, we feel the responsibility to make sure that we're reassuring all of our partners that our students are aware and have, the knowledge and the skills in order to re-enter any type of setting that they may be assigned to. And so we have competency and safety and quality labs where they will be demonstrating before every clinical how to put on PPE, how to take off PPE. They'll have to watch CDC videos. They'll have to upload a screening tool into an online Castle Branch account that we have, saying, that they don't have any symptoms, and they'll constantly be doing the self-checks every day. Temperatures will be checked at the door at the hospitals and in the other settings, as well as in the college. And so there are certain videos, certain modules, and certain competencies that they have to demonstrate to us, so that the instructors are also feeling very confident that everyone is aware and no one is jeopardizing anyone else along the way.
Great, thank you so much. That's really helpful to hear. I guess I'd like to ask a question, and I'll maybe start with you, Jane, and then just because I know it's sometimes hard in this format, I'll just specifically ask Kip and Laura the same question. But I'm just kind of curious how this experience is a special opportunity in learning how these professions work under stress or under special conditions. It is, as we've all said, really extraordinary time, but we're also learning that the professions that we're training our students to go into have to react to crises like these or emergency environments like these as a part of the profession. So again, I'm sure that that's already built into the curriculum and into the experience in a regular year, but I'm curious how you're talking about that in your different fields and in preparing students to go into it. So Jane, I don't know if you can go first.
I think in CONHS, we've always taught all of our students across all disciplines, you have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible, you have to be a team player. Collaboration is so important. You work as a team for all of this. But what's really happened in practice, and Laura, you kind of touched on this, is the fact that so many people now are dependent on so many other people in ways that were never existed before. And so we're seeing that in all across the board, that what we normally maybe just the nursing or OT or speech language would do, or exercise science, everyone is just all hands on deck, and a lot of different situations are coming up that require that overall teamwork, collaboration, interdisciplinary work. I mean, it's pervasive.
Thank you. Jane, I'm going to stick with you just for a second because we have a question come through for you regarding the Back to BSN program, and but it might be a question that would apply to any situation. But the question is, and you just started touching on it with that answer. But what differences are there in the learning experiences in the program itself that are adapted because of COVID-19, if any? Or how is the pedagogy changing, I guess, is the question.
So the Back to BSN is our accelerated BSN program, and they're individuals that have a first degree in something, and they come back to Lewis for their BSN. And so that is a year-round program, which differs from our traditional and some of our other programs. And so occupational therapy is year-round, so is speech language. And so what ended up happening in March, when everything pretty much shut down for many of us, the Back to BSN, we continued to revise their curriculum, even though they weren't getting clinical face-to-face experiences. We did a lot of virtual experiences, such as iHuman. So, for example, the students that were graduating in May, we ended up those last 8 weeks for Back to BSN and traditional doing like 100-hour virtual clinical that we would have been going to the hospital with them for, so that they could graduate on time, so that the graduation dates aren't being held up. And so the Back to BSN has been in a little bit of a different situation because the clinical sites just opened up 2 weeks ago for us in the summer. So they're finally getting their clinical time, but we had to revise some of their curricular coursework in order to make sure they're continuing to move along. But now they're just starting back with the face-to-face versus the virtual clinicals that they've been having. Does that answer that question, Chris?
Thank you so much. And that's a reminder that we do have the askus@lewisu.edu email address on the screen. And if you have more questions, please send them in, and we will try to get them before we close for today. Kip, I'm going to turn to you. There actually is a question that has come through for you, and it kind of relates to what I was going to ask you anyway, which is the question is a kind of concrete question. Can a student do a virtual placement? So that's sort of a yes or no question that you might have a long answer to, because I'm sure it's complicated. But also, I guess I'd like you to maybe reflect on that same question. And I think the virtual instruction in K through 12 education is such a great example of that. Like how the profession, at least temporarily, is really changing and evolving, and teachers are going through so many changes in their professions right now. I'm wondering how much our students are getting access to teachers going through that, and then so there's a concrete question about the experiential learning of our student candidates, but also just how is it an opportunity to learn about the profession?
Right, no, exactly. Any good teacher has strong adaptability skills, right? And that's true of the other professions that we study in the College of Education and Social Sciences. So to the specific question, so if we're talking about education, yes, the answer is yes. A student can have a virtual placement. And the particulars of that vary depending on if we're talking about a student teacher being placed or if this is a field and clinical placement, one of those earlier experiences. So almost all of those earlier field and clinical experiences in education are going to be virtual or alternative. With regard to student teachers, yes, it can be a kind of virtual placement, and what we're doing right now is wherever the student teacher is being placed, whatever the plan is in that district is exactly what that student teacher will experience, right? So if the district that a student teacher is placed in is going with a blended model, then the student teacher will experience the blended model. If they're doing all remote learning, then the student teacher will also have that experience of delivering fully remote learning. And so, yeah, it's a really great time to, I think we've been sort of forced by necessity to really ramp up that adaptability component of the education of teachers, but it's the same with clinical mental health counseling and with social work. Those folks are having to adapt as well because they're doing a very similar thing that our student teachers are doing. You know, we're very aware of the agencies in which these students are placed for an internship. Those agencies have specific adaptations that they've made as they deliver their services, and our students obviously then have to adapt to those as well as the safety measures that we're taking on our end. So yeah, there's a lot of learning that's really productive in terms of honing those adaptability skills that are sort of being we're sort of engaged in by necessity right now.
Thank you. That's great. Another question's come in that maybe is a good way. We'll stay with you, Kip, and then Jane. I'd like you to try to answer this as well, and I might have some reflection on it as well. But the question is about how Lewis will help students in this job environment search for work, find work, connect with employers. And so we've been focusing, our time is running a little short, so this is sort of a good transition into a close where we've been focusing on making sure that students are having that learning experience. But as always at Lewis, we're very much connected to that, connecting students to their first position and so on. So you might even talk about how that works generally in these fields and how they relate to these professional placements. So Kip, if you could go first.
Yeah, for sure. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's sort of a variety, a menu of options because we're having to offer alternative and virtual experiences. Our students across the different professional programs they'll just be engaged in a lot of work that will sort of match the needs of the times, right? That we have maybe realized that there are a certain kind of set of skills that different professions will need to have in their skill set a little bit more than maybe they have in the past. And yeah, we just have as I said, a wide variety of opportunities for our students to learn those skills and then be able to demonstrate them to their future employers. And certainly when students are placed in a particular agency or they're placed in a particular school doing student teaching or internship work or other field and clinical placement work, that is always a place for a pre-service teacher to show that, hey, I've got the chops to do this virtual or remote learning, and I can do the in-person delivery as well. And so these are always great opportunities, but now particularly opportunities to show future employers that you're actually even working with in the moment, right, of doing a field or a clinical placement experience. So it's a really good time to put a lot of arrows in your quiver.
Thank you. Jane, your thoughts about that?
Yes, so we'll be graduating our first occupational therapy class in December. So I'm assuming a lot of those students will be getting positions. And speech language is a newer program that started this summer. So that hasn't happened yet. Exercise science and nursing. So again, I go back to our reputation in Lewis, and when Kip, kind of like what you mentioned, when our stakeholders, our partners see our students in action in the clinical sites, wherever they may be, they always say to us, and I'm giving us a plug, but we hear it a lot, is that we would like to hire a Lewis student, a Lewis nursing student, or any of our students, because they present themselves so well in these various sites. So as far as nursing and jobs for our undergraduate students, that really is another area that is a wealth of opportunity for them. They're able to, many of these students work as certified nurse assistants or maybe patient care techs. So they have already been living through this pandemic in their jobs in that capacity, not maybe as a nurse, but in these other roles. And so that will make them much further ahead and much more aware of how our healthcare looks now versus how it looked really before February and March.
Thank you. And we will start to close. I might want to ask each of you if you'd like to make a final comment. And I also just want to point out maybe one other comment that we received through or question or comment that we received through the email address. It's a little bit, I'm going to call it a philosophical question, or I'm going to interpret it that way. I know you will appreciate that, Kip. You're our philosopher with us today. But it is meant to be a practical question, and that's a very serious, which is, how are our students getting the type of hands-on, is the expression I used at the beginning of this hour, experience that we value so much at Lewis, when a lot of our accommodations and our flexibility derives around doing online education or having a virtual placement with a community partner or in a virtual educational setting, and so on. So I think that's such a wise question, and it really cuts to the heart, I think, of so much of what we've been thinking about and talking about since the very beginning of the pandemic, around how we balance what our mission is, what our educational mission is, what our responsibility is to our communities, and what our responsibility is for health and safety of our students. And I think that question and the topic today really gets to how it comes down to those nitty-gritty decisions about how you do a certain type of placement. So that's my final comment of the day, probably. But maybe Laura, could you go first in your final comment?
Sure. I think right now what's on my mind the most is ensuring that we're still engaging students in meaningful learning in the community in new ways. I think this is one of those moments where we don't have a choice but to think differently. And a lot of the organizations with which we partner are doing the same thing. And so while this time has been a truly challenging one, it has pushed all of us to seek creative solutions to what's in front of us, and that's been exciting to me. And in those moments where I'm personally struggling a little, I've really been able to go back to that and see the ways that folks are being really creative, because there are concerns that need to be addressed, and so they're really doing all that they can to find creative ways of engaging people to respond to the needs that exist in the community. So I'm feeling optimistic as a result of that right now.
Thank you. Kip?
Yeah, I want to echo that optimism. The tagline that you'll find under the College of Education and Social Sciences website for our college is valuing community, focusing on social justice. And I know we talked about the advantages of the unique kinds of placements that are going on with regard to securing a job or pursuing a profession, but our students really take that tagline seriously, and they're prepared not just to go in and hone their professional craft in these placements, but to serve their community that they're in. And social workers, teachers, clinical mental health counselors. I know in this moment we're all concerned with a kind of physical, biological safety, but those professions are concerned with other kinds of safety too. Mm-hmm. And there are some real opportunities, unique opportunities right now to serve our communities through education and counseling and social work. And our students definitely are ready to meet that challenge.
Jane?
I agree with that completely. The feedback that we've gotten from students across all disciplines is, when are we going to be able to get back to, get back into it? When are we going to be able to, do a little bit more face-to-face? Students are interested in continuing their education with that hands-on approach, and also that giving back to the community and all of those things that we've talked about. The students, I feel, and the faculty are extremely motivated. And I know that, we're in phase 4, but everyone is very optimistic that hopefully we can get as much accomplished in that way this semester as we can possibly do. So that's what we're hoping for. That's what people seem to want, all of us, students, faculty.
Thank you so much. And so again, thank you to each of you. It's an absolute honor to work with each of you, and I'm so energized by listening to you talk about the work that you do. And so thank you. I will just say before saying goodbye, a reminder to everyone that there is a great deal of work going on in preparing for the fall semester, and please be on the lookout for emails, watch social media for announcements, and other sources of information. We will be communicating a lot of details and information about ways that we're preparing for the fall, and always know that the Return to Campus website is being updated continually. So a lot more to come. We will be back next week with President Livingston. I look forward to seeing everyone then. God bless you and your families, and have a great week.